Yeah. Maybe one of them.
Okay, this is asparagus, right? They sell it in bundles like this. This is a pound, right? 1 pound of asparagus. And they sell it in sizes, right? This is called pencil asparagus because it's the only thing I can get right now. There is also asparagus that's about twice this size. It's called medium asparagus. There's asparagus that's about 3 times this diameter, which is called large. And then there's also jumbo, which is about the size of my thumb, okay, diameter. The thing about asparagus is that it grows into a great big bush. It's a sprout, right? It's harvested when it's very young. You'll notice that on the sides are these little brown triangles, right? If it was to be allowed to grow, that's where stems would come out, okay? So there's a lot of cellulose in those, okay? When they're this small, that thin, it's difficult to get those off. I kind of like the bigger ones for that. But generally for most asparagus, we're gonna get these little things off there because they're stringy and tough, and they get in your teeth, and you end up chewing them too much, okay? So a vegetable peeler, lay it flat on the board. Don't stand it up like this, okay? Lay it flat on the board. You wanna use a vegetable peeler and just really light. You can see how I'm holding this. I'm not putting any pressure on it at all. All I wanna do is pull those tips off, okay? Now I'm gonna leave the tips on some of them. I'm gonna take the tips off the others. And you're gonna see the difference when we cook them, okay? So we're gonna take the tips off these. It's really difficult to get these that are really that thin, right? And there's a lot of chefs that don't even bother doing this on asparagus this size, but you guys need the instruction and the technique to be able to get this accomplished. If you put too much pressure on your vegetable peeler, you're gonna do that, right? And you're gonna lose half your asparagus or a quarter of it or whatever. You don't wanna do that, okay? A couple more of these. An order of asparagus is generally about 3 ounces at the most, right? So I would pick out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's some nice skinny ones, bigger ones, right? For a dish, generally that or this would be probably 1 order, right? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these. The jumbos, 2 to 3. The mediums or larges, 4, somewhere around in there, 4 or 5 maybe. But we just want to make sure that we've got a nice balance of quantity against the protein that we're serving and or the starch. And I'd really like to have some starch today, but watch out for the heads. You want heads that are really nice and firm, not flabby. Okay. Yeah, there's a joke in there somewhere. But we won't go there today. And this is a pain in the butt. It does take forever. But it does produce a much higher quality product. Okay. So now, I need to make all of these the same size. So I'm going to take one, grab it by its tip, by its end, and I'm going to bend to try and meet at the bottom. Where it snaps is the difference between the tender part and the tough part. Okay? So that becomes my measuring stick, since they're all about the same size, for my asparagus. Okay? We're going to go ahead and measure these out too. These are the ones that we didn't peel, right? So that you can see how different that's going to be. One. Okay. Now, you save these, right? And we'll make cream of asparagus soup out of it next week. Let's see if I can find some goat cheese. Cream of asparagus soup with goat cheese. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that gets our asparagus. Now, anybody know why I had it wrapped in paper towels? Asparagus will come to you in a case with a wet diaper on the bottom. Okay, so that the stalks here where they've been cut can absorb water. Okay, too much water, and they tend to do this really fast. Okay, the heads just rot. Okay, if they get too wet, so they need to be fairly dry. So if you get them in and you don't have the box with the little diaper on the bottom, you take them and you wrap them in a paper towel and then put them in a plastic bag and put them in the refrigerator, and they'll keep much better than they will if they're just set in there like this. Okay, so this keeps them nice and fresh, keeps just enough moisture on them, right, in the refrigerator. So we do that. This might grab me a bowl for this one. Get it off my board. Okay, fish. Oh, let's do butter first. This is whole soft butter, 1 ounce whole soft butter, and 1 ounce of AP flour. All right, we're gonna make kneaded butter with it. Okay. The butter's been sitting out at room temperature, so it should be soft enough to knead without having to use a mixer. And this is just what we're gonna do. We're gonna just make sure we get flour on there, right? Mash, mash. We're gonna knead this together until all the flour is incorporated into the butter, okay? Now, if I was making pie dough, this would be cold butter, it would be chopped, and so that we get separate flakes of butter inside the flour and with the flour, okay? Makes your pie crust nice and flaky, but this isn't pie crust. And this is what we're looking for. We just want to make sure that all of that butter and flour is kneaded together. It's going to be pretty soft, okay? And when we go to actually use it, soft my fingers. And you can use a spoon to do this if you want to, or a fork. Plastic fork works a little better. It doesn't stick to your fingers as bad. Use it, we're going to make little balls out of it. This gets refrigerated. Firm it up just a little bit so it's a little easier to work with. And we're going to make a little ball out of it. This would be about the size of the ball we want to start with, okay, for our sauce. Jeffrey, would you grab me another extra large glove, please? Thank you. Fish. This is a salmon fillet. This is a farm-raised salmon fillet. It's going to be fattier than a wild-caught salmon because they have access to a whole lot more food and they don't have to swim around and get it. Check this and make sure it doesn't have any pin bones in it. And then we're going to skin it. The more times you see this process happen, the better it is for you.
During home cooking, I have a question I've never been able to answer. But if you leave the skin on, do you have to descale salmon, or is it one of those?
Yes, you have to take. If you leave the skin on any fish, you have to take the scales off of it.
Okay.
The scales are like bones, they're like fingernails.
I've heard some you can leave on, but yeah, some you have to take off.
Small trout, there are some small trout that the scales are fine enough, but they still the texture is really weird. but they're like fingernails. They're hard.
I always err on the side of caution. I just never knew for sure if I had to.
This one, that's a scale, right? And it's right here. Came off this side. Generally, they've got a machine that will scale these nowadays, right? They run through and pops all the scales off, which is really nice. And we want to check for pin bones. Right down this row, it looks like they've taken them all out. Right down this, right? If we push up and towards the tail, if there's a pin bone there, it'll pop up, right? And then we need to pull it out because you don't want bones in your fish. That's a physical hazard, right? But we do need to skin this. We're gonna poach this today, so we need to skin it. Put a piece of the fin bone in there. Skinning fish is trying to get the skin separated from the flesh, and the idea is to run right through what we call the fat line. Between the flesh of the fish and the skin, there's going to be fat. Okay. Wild fish will not have nearly the fat line that farm-raised fish do, because they have to like swim for their food, and farm-raised don't, right? And so now you also find that farm-raised fish now have to be labeled, artificially colored if they're salmon, right? So what we're doing is we're going to take our knife, we're going to go right down to the skin, okay, and get about a 10 or 15 degree angle. We want to be right down at the skin. This is fat. That brown stuff, that's fat. This is flesh, okay? And I bring this all the way up to the edge of the board because the knife, the edge of the knife has to pinch the skin, right, between the board and the knife. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right? So we're going to use the knife to separate it. It doesn't really matter. So we want about a 10 to 15 degree angle, and we want to wiggle the skin. Hold the knife pretty steady. It'll rock a little bit, but we want to wiggle the skin and pull. Okay? Now, when I do these every day, I can generally take this fat line off and leave it on the skin, okay? Because every day I practice, practice. You hit that perfect line where you take all that fat off at the same time, just leave the fat here. Because we're gonna take that fat off the fillets before we cook them, okay? So. Yeah, I got a little high there. So, okay. This, you can, okay? We'll just talk about this right now. We're going to do this again later. So you can see some scales right there, right? I wouldn't serve that because that's like toenails, okay? This is fairly clean, but I can take this skin, a pair of scissors works better.
Fry that baby up.
And there are some scales left on this. Scaled very well. All of these need to come off. Okay, that's fish scales. Right? And if you push from the front of the fish to the back of the fish, they'll lift up and separate. Lift and separate, lift and separate. Okay. This last few off of here. Now I can take this piece of skin. Okay, doesn't have any scales on it. Okay, I can dust it in some seasoned flour, drop it in the fryer, or put it in a saute pan and crisp it. Okay, and then use it as a garnish on a plate. Okay, because once it's crisp, it'll stand up. Okay, so it could be salmon with crispy skin. You could. You can also, once you've scaled it, you could leave this on the fish, cut your portion. This side would go in the pan first on gentle heat until you render the fat out from underneath of it and it crisps up. And then you flip the fillet over, flip the portion over, and let it finish on the other side, okay? And crispy skin is, there are lots of, people use it all the time. I'm just not a big fan of it because to me it tastes like fish, okay? Like old fish. So. But there's a lot of people who use that nowadays. And many years ago, I saw a seafood platter made with barquettes, which are like boat-shaped. with the skin lining the barquette mold and then a salmon mousse inside of it. So when you turned it out, it was this color as opposed to salmon color.
In Asia, you can get bags of chips over.
Yep. You can get all kinds of stuff in Asia.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get rid of this. Portions. I'm going to cut some portions real quick. Then we're going to show you how to do all of this, and then I'll cut some more portions. By the way, if you scale a fish in a sink, which is usually where I scale them, or on the table, you will find the scales go everywhere.
Yes.
Picking them out of your hair. Now, when I portion salmon, there are some chefs that will portion salmon by cutting right straight across this fillet. And you get a piece of salmon that's about this wide, this thick over here, and that thick over here. It doesn't make for even cooking. Okay? So I always portion my salmon by using this part right here, right down the backbone from this portion over, and then this gets trimmed, and then I portion this piece out so that all those pieces are the same. Okay? So this one kind of got hacked a little bit right here. Okay. So we're going to come right down the backbone where the backbone was. Over here. Now this gets trimmed up and evened out, but I don't throw this away. This either gets cured and cold smoked, or cured with Asian spices, and then I call it salmon bacon. All right, because once it's cured, you can slice it off and serve it. You don't have to cook it. Okay. And we used to use this to garnish salads. We just said salad, blah 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 blah, with salmon bacon, and we would take slices off of it and put it on there. It's like having cold smoked salmon without the smoke, really, or with the smoke on that. Okay. So, and you could also take that and make salmon salad out of it. You can make salmon mousse. You can make all kinds of stuff with it. Salmon sausage. So we're going to trim this end. And then we're all going to get about a 3-ounce portion. I'll do the other one here. Let me get through with our demo. I need one of these. Okay. This take over here. Now we have a number of ingredients to this. Now, what is gourmet?
One back.
Uncooked roux,
Oh,
also called
I was thinking Bainbury.
kneaded butter. Right? I need that butter. And pan. We are going to poach, which is what is our temperature for poaching? 160 to 185, right? We are going to take a piece of whole butter, okay? And we are going to butter our pan. This pan needs to be cold. Well, not refrigerator cold, but it needs to be cold. Then, we're going to add shallots. Okay, we got about a teaspoon of shallots, a teaspoon and a half. Okay. Our herbs, we have a thyme sprig, bay leaf, and a sprig of tarragon. we have 2 ounces of white wine. Put it here. Put our fish right here. Take our cartouche. Cartouche is just going to go right over the top. Make sure it stays inside the pan because you're going to poach on top of the stove and it will burn if it pitches the edge. And then we're going to let it slowly come up to temp. Okay. It does need to get hot enough it produces steam inside that cartouche because that's how your salmon's going to cook from the bottom and the top. If you don't cook it from the top, it's going to be wrong. Okay? Which to me is not a bad thing, but most people won't eat it that way. Okay? So we're going to let that go. In the meantime, we set up our poaching water, our blanching water for our asparagus. This has to be at a full rolling boil before we go to blanch. Okay? So we need to let that come up to a full rolling boil. This is going up. Once you get everything needs for this, this won't take very long to finish. Okay? This salmon shouldn't take any more than 10 to 12 minutes. It shouldn't. Okay? Sometimes it does, depending on how thick it is. Okay? This shouldn't take any longer than 10 to 12 minutes unless the water is already hot. So, go from there. These are for garnish. These 2 pads are for finishing our asparagus and our sauce. This is Bermudet. Now you saw I put my large piece of Bermudet in the refrigerator. I want it to chill a little bit so that I can manipulate it a little easier. Okay? It won't be quite so sticky for me. This sauce should end up being creamy white. You'll notice that where that parchment's sitting right there on that piece of salmon, that's going to have to be adjusted just a little bit because that parchment's going to keep the steam away from it. It's going to keep it from cooking. Okay? So, adjust that just a little bit. Make that temp work just a little better. And it's poaching. How do we tell when it's done? Do this, right? But it's going to react completely different than chicken or beef protein. Okay? When I touch that, put a little pressure on it, if it just begins to flake, because fish has large flake, sometimes, most of the times this does, right? If it just begins to break away and flake, it's done. The center of this piece of salmon should be about 135 to 136 degrees when we pull it. Okay? Which means that it's going to be that salmon color in the center. It's not going to be that white pink, light pink that the outside is going to be. The outside is going to be a little translucent again. It should still be medium rare medium. Okay? If you take it medium well to well, you're going to have to be some dry fish that's not going to be good. Okay? So we want to just make sure that that happens.
So, are there procedures you can't just poach a piece of salmon for the program?
When you guys get to HACCP, right? When it comes to purchasing products that are safe for your operation, what's the #1 rule? Right? Anyone got there yet? Sanitation? Yeah, you do the flow of food next week. Yeah. So in the flow of food, you have purchasing, receiving, storage, right? When it's purchasing, the #1 rule, especially with fresh fish, is purchasing reputable suppliers.
Yeah.
be out of the water before you consume it. Therein lies the issue. Because most people assume that the fresher the fish, the less chance you have of getting sick from it. Actually, it's the more chance you have of getting sick from it. The sashimi quality fish should have been frozen at 30 degrees below zero for a minimum of 15 days. That kills the eggs from parasites and the parasites. So if they happen to be in there, the eggs aren't going to just get into your system and give you heartworms or whatever. Right? So we're going to check this. Oh yeah, you're done. See how that just broke away when I pushed on it? That's done. Okay. So I'm going to pull that out. Take this guy off. Go over here. You first. Pull this guy out. Go here. Pull that. Go ahead and remove my herbs. In here. Now you can use a wooden spoon, you can use a whisk, you can use a rubber spatula. But the idea is to just break this down, and we're going to need another little ball in here too. See how that's thickening? Alright. That's what we want it to do. See how you guys are doing. Asparagus. Then we go right out of there, right in here. Find that clam juice has a lot of salt in it already, because it's clam juice, it's ocean water. So you shouldn't have to use too much salt in this at all. How clean and pretty these guys look. I got